What's up everyone? So today I'm going to create my custom Space Marine chapter as a beginner painter doing an Assault Intercessor squad. So this is the look I'm going for. I tried it out on one, but let's see what I can create. So of course I'm going to start out with priming my miniature black. The way I do this is I just pour a little bit in the cup, and from what I've seen, thinning it down is probably the best thing to do if you're going to be using an airbrush gun. 1 part paint and 1 part thinner, and I just estimate, and then most of the time it turns out pretty good. Sometimes I'll thin it down too much or too little and it's kind of visible. I'm going to be using my Amazon $60 electric airbrush. I like this thing. For mini projects like this is perfect. If you're doing 1 unit, this airbrush is pretty much on point, especially for priming and base coating. But if you're doing like a unit of 5, I would recommend you plug it in between colors. So for instance, paint all your miniatures black, then plug it in, clean out your airbrush, go on to the next color after you've given it some time to charge. And priming it this way is obviously the best, or you can just get a spray can and spray them down that way. I found this process to be pretty enjoyable. So after a few short minutes, my whole miniature is covered and I just think it looks great. This is one of my custom kit bashes that I did using the veteran squad for Dark Angels. Of course, I really didn't want to paint this chapter green, so that's why I decided to use the color scheme I had, because I haven't seen very many orange Space Marines. Next color we're going to use is matte white from Army Painter, and we're going to do some zenithal highlighting from the top down. I find that this is a great base start for most of the miniatures that I've done so far. And again, we're just going to use my nice little electric airbrush. It gets the job done quick and easy. I try to do a good cover just so we can have some good contrast between the highlights and the shadows. And this is somewhat of just a really easy, quick process. I try to be as liberal as I can on the shoulders, really make sure to get it all the way down to the feet. And so here you can see there's a good, nice undertone dark in most of the layers. Just set us up nicely for our next color, which is dry rust. I didn't know that this was an effect paint at the time, but it was probably the best army paint of this color that I could find. And it seems like it turned out just fine, especially when I mixed it with some thinner. It went on nicely and very, very easy again. And just over the top of this zenithal highlight, it really gave me a good start with some deep shadows in the crevices. This is just an easy step. I really do enjoy the airbrushing process. You don't have to spend, I don't even know how much the air compressed airbrushes are, but for $60 I've been enjoying this airbrush, and it's been really good for me. I don't have experience with a compressed airbrush. This here was very, very easy to use, so I highly recommend you check it out. I probably won't put the link down below, but if you hit me up in the questions, I can probably tell you which one I got. So the next color is Fire Lizard. I really wanted to transition from this yellow down to the orange as if it's a highlight high ends of the figure. So definitely made sure to get the shoulder pads and then overspray down onto the leg and onto the arm. Just doing less coverage than the orange, still doing a good amount to blend it because I didn't quite want that rich orange. And this yellow really brought in a new depth to my Space Marine. Now this is a Dark Angel Space Marine chapter. I got some extra bits, but I just didn't want to do the green. So it was going to be between the green and the orange, and I decided to go with something a little bit more custom. Don't even have a name from these guys yet. I'm sure I'll come up with something by the end. So yeah, after a few short passes, you can already see just the contrast between the yellow and the orange, and it really is turning out really nice. The shoulder pads really do have some nice highlights at the top. Alright, so the next thing that I did, and probably the hardest part of this whole process, was to use Arid Earth, do some pinstriping. So I'm sorry that my filming is a little, well, it's just hard to see what I'm doing. But right now I am just soaking my brush, making sure I don't have too much but not too little, trying to just get the tip into the recesses of the miniature and trying to get all the fine lines on the armor. Just take your time with this, because in the end it's just going to stand out so much more. And when you get a little spillover, just wipe it off. Arid Earth is really easy to work with. The only thing is if you try to coat the whole miniature, it will dull down all of your base coat that you just sprayed on, and so that's why I decided to do some pinstriping. Again, it's a tedious process and it does take a while, but to be honest, I really did enjoy this process. It just takes time. And if you can see, I'm using my pinky and resting it on my other hand or on the base of the figure to give me more control while I try to pinstripe, because I'm not good, so I'm learning some techniques. And again, this is my first Space Marine unit. I have never painted a Space Marine before this, but with watching plenty of YouTube videos, you should be set to go. So I did just take my time, tried to get in all the small spots. Some areas underneath you can be pretty liberal, and it's easy to remove if you have too much in a crevice. But taking the time will definitely make your miniature look that much better in the end. So I am sorry for poor top-down video filming and that you can't really see what the tip of my brush is doing. So next time I'll be a little bit more aware and try to bring you more of the detail of how I'm painting. So yeah, I'm usually going around pretty much all of any corner, any nook and cranny I can find that can use a little bit shadowing, especially here on his wrist guard, kind of a cross with a skull, and so I am just dabbing around that to give it more of a shadow effect. And I pretty much did that throughout the miniature. The legs have probably the most striping to do, and here I'm just taking off some of the Arid Earth with my finger, and as you can see, just after a few short minutes, getting some of those fine lines, the shade, it just makes the figure pop that much more already. And really, we haven't spent that much time doing a whole lot of anything technical. It's just time consuming and trying to be a little bit more careful. So I hope that gives you a better image of kind of how to pinstripe. Now let's go ahead and move on to Arid Earth. And so what I did is I grabbed this off-color white, and I'm sorry, this whole segment here is going to be blurry because the camera was focused on the table below. But if you can imagine, I am trying to coat as much of the helmet as I can, and one coat of this paint was pretty much covered most of the orange helmet. Did have to go back in and do 2 coats. After 2 coats, it really was pretty much all covered. And here I'm going back with a wet brush with no paint, and I'm just kind of removing some of the white. Here I'm doing the skull on his chest plate. I don't know what they call these. I know they have a specific name for them. I'm just taking my time, and I'm not using a big brush. Small brush. My brush is actually pretty big, but it comes to a fine tip, and I found it pretty easy to work with. And you can go with a smaller brush, and playing with the amount of paint you have on your brush is pretty important too, because that will kind of decide whether paint is going to seep into these eye sockets or into details. So playing around with it will definitely give you techniques, and you will learn a lot more than watching a video on YouTube once you start painting yourself. So if you can see, I've gotten the main part of the helmet, and I just need to get the side cheekbones. And what I do is I just kind of I know my tip, and then I just kind of go over the top of the protruding part of the cheek, and usually I can just skim on it and it'll come through with a nice, just a top coat of the skull without going into the eye sockets. But from this angle, I mean, you can see how dark it is underneath the Space Marine's arms and some of the underparts, but it looks really good. I really did enjoy being able to create that depth of contrast. And I really did find that I like these army paints. I bought a Citadel starter kit paint set, and I think whoever I bought it from, the set must have been a little old, or the paints don't really, they kind of separate. And so that's why I like these army paints themselves. I haven't had any issues, and they really do coat nicely just straight out of the tube. Most of the times I do have to water it down as I work with it. I don't have a wet palette yet, but I do have one coming in from Army Painter that I'm going to try using it, and I'll do a review on that as well just to see how it works. I've created my own wet palette at home. I don't know how I feel about it, so I'll check out the one from Army Painter and see how that works out compared to what I had going myself. Here I'm just applying black to the chainsword. I'm also going to apply black to a few other spots, but right now, so we're on our third base color, and so I'm just going to hit his bolter here, the casing. But as you can tell already, a few different colors in, we're just bringing this miniature to life. It doesn't take, I'm not doing anything technical. All of this is something a beginner can do easily. There is nothing that requires you to do crazy shadowing or just some of the more technical tips that I've seen people do and tricks. Most of the hardest parts about this black was just trying to stay within the lines on the shoulder pads. It can be kind of hard, but again, I always recommend you rest your pinky on one of your fingers on the other hand while you're trying to pinstripe in areas where you don't want it to bleed over. So I grabbed out my Agrax Earthshade and I kind of just started applying it into some of the textured areas on the helmet just to give it a definition. I did end up going back with the Arid Earth white color and touching up some of the bleeds and some of the heavy shades, and it really wasn't that hard at all, and it gave me a pretty good final result. As you can see, I'm being pretty liberal on the face mask, but I am going to go back and touch up some of the more flatter surfaces of the face mask. I find that painting the helmet of a Space Marine different color than the rest of his body just makes him look more modern, and that's why I decided to do all my Space Marines in this white earth type color. It just made them look standoutish. I don't know, but it wasn't very hard to hit all the crevices and really get a good result. So I did apply some turquoise at the end. As you can see, orange and teal obviously is a good color combination, and I didn't know what to put after I got done with the orange, and once I decided to put on some of this turquoise, I was really excited. And I don't know if it's turquoise, I don't know my colors, but once I put on this bluish color on there, it just made the Space Marine stand out. So this is my squad. This is my first squad. I'll probably do some transfers later, but if you can see, I did paint the gold wings on their chests and a few other things that I did off camera, like the silver. I painted a few other things silver, like their chain swords. And these are my select paints for this scheme from Army Painter. Obviously primed it black, And then we did a zenithal highlight using the matte white. Both great colors, easy to work with. And then, so as you remember, the next color that we used was dry rust. It's an effect, but it turned out great for painting. So then we moved on to fire lizard. The fun process about painting is when you put on a new color, it just makes you excited to put on more. And so this Hydra turquoise was one of my, when I started putting it on, I got so excited that I was able to just knock these guys out. Obviously, I'm not done. I think there's a lot more detail that I can go into and finish painting. But for a first time paint scheme, I think these colors turned out awesome. And I really enjoyed using these army paints on my Assault Intercessors. So if you guys like that little quick tutorial of how I was able to paint these Space Marines as a beginner, and this is my custom chapter, let me know, and I have some other Kit Bash Space Marines that I've been painting. Alright guys, thanks, subscribe and like. We'll see you next time. Bye.